There is a force so silent, so invisible, that it has shaped the fate of nations, empires, and even the destiny of the church itself. These aren't the fiery warriors you imagine when thinking of angels, nor the serene, glowing beings sent to guide individuals. No, these are the principalities, the unseen governors of the earth. What if I told you that the rise and fall of great civilizations, the birth of empires, and the very systems we live under today were not mere chance or human effort alone? No, there's a hidden force behind it all, and it's more powerful than you could ever imagine. These angels of governance shape history from the shadows, influencing leaders, steering nations, and determining the fate of cultures across time. But why has this been kept from you? Why have these celestial forces been hidden in plain sight, obscured by the noise of everyday life? Are you ready to unveil the truth that has been veiled for centuries? In this video, we will dive deep into the role of principalities, these powerful angels that oversee the spiritual and moral direction of entire kingdoms. You'll discover how their influence has shaped our world in ways you've never been told. You'll understand why nations rise to greatness and why they fall into decay, all through the unseen hand of the principalities. This is more than just divine governance. This is the silent force that guides history itself. Are you ready to uncover the truths that have been hidden for so long? Are you prepared to see the spiritual battle that lies behind every political shift, every rise and fall of power? Trust me, you won't look at the world the same way again. Stay tuned. What you're about to learn will change your perception of angels, spiritual warfare, and divine governance forever. And as we unravel these ancient mysteries, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because this journey into the world of the principalities is just the beginning. The unseen forces that have shaped the fate of nations, empires, and entire civilizations are not mere historical accidents. These are the principalities, divine beings assigned by the heavenly realms to govern, to guide, and, when necessary, to withdraw their favor, allowing kingdoms to crumble into chaos. But what are these principalities really? What is their purpose in the grand design of our world, and why have they been kept hidden from the eyes of men for so long? The principalities are not mere watchers, but active stewards of history itself. Imagine a force so powerful that it can determine the rise or fall of a nation, the success or failure of a ruler, and even the shifting tides of culture and civilization. Their work is not seen, but their impact is undeniable. Their subtle influence moves the gears of human civilization in ways that few truly understand. These spiritual governors are assigned to oversee entire nations, dynasties, and even religions, guiding them toward justice, righteousness, and divine will. But what happens when a nation, a leader, or a system strays too far from the path? What happens when corruption seeps in and the principalities withdraw? Consider the rise of Babylon, that magnificent empire that once stood as a beacon of power and prestige. King Nebuchadnezzar, a ruler who built one of the ancient wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, was, in many ways, a man chosen and guided by a principality. Yet, as time wore on, and as Nebuchadnezzar's heart grew proud, he lost his way, and the principality withdrew its favor. What followed was a period of madness, a descent into humility where Nebuchadnezzar was reduced to living like an animal. The once great empire faltered and eventually fell. This is not a mere coincidence. It is the withdrawal of divine favor from a people and a ruler who failed to honor the divine purpose. The principality was not there to micromanage, but to guide. When the guidance was rejected, the fall was inevitable. We see the same pattern throughout history. The Roman Empire, at its height, was one of the most powerful civilizations to ever walk the earth. Its laws, its culture, and its military prowess spread far and wide, as though the very hand of God was upon it. But as time passed, the principalities that once helped guide Rome began to fade, and what followed was corruption at the highest levels. The empire splintered, and its greatness crumbled into dust. The same forces that had once held it together, the spiritual forces of the principalities, had withdrawn. It's a sobering reminder that no empire, no kingdom, no leader is ever beyond the influence of divine judgment. This brings us to the question, why do the principalities withdraw? Why does it seem as though nations that were once blessed by divine favor fall into ruin? The answer lies in the nature of the principalities themselves. These angels are not micromanagers. They do not control free will. They are not there to enforce every action, every thought. Instead, their role is to guide, to nudge nations and rulers toward justice and righteousness, to create conditions where society can thrive in harmony with divine will. But when the moral compass of a society shifts, when leaders abandon the path of righteousness, the principalities pull back. This does not happen out of spite, nor does it happen in anger. It is a natural consequence of a world that has chosen its own path instead of following divine order. When a kingdom becomes so entrenched in its own corruption, the principality withdraws, leaving that kingdom to face the natural consequences of its actions. It is not just the fall of empires that reveals the hidden hand of the principalities. Their influence is seen in the rise of righteous leaders as well. Consider the story of the prophet Daniel. In the book of Daniel, we see the influence of a principality at work when King Darius, a Persian ruler, allows the Israelites to return to their land. Daniel himself, though exiled, rises to prominence because of the divine favor granted to him. But again, as with Nebuchadnezzar, the withdrawal of divine favor is swift when a ruler or a people falls into rebellion. Daniel, despite his wisdom and righteousness, is not immune to the spiritual battles at play. The principality that had once helped guide the kingdom began to withdraw as the kings of Persia and Greece began to turn their eyes away from God's will. But what does this mean for us today? Are we immune to the same fate? Could the principalities be at work in the nations and leaders of today, shaping history from behind the curtain? The answer is not only a resounding yes, but it is a call to action. We are living in a time where the moral compass of nations is in question, and the withdrawal of divine favor is a very real possibility. Are we as a society turning away from justice, from righteousness, from the very will of God? The principalities are not the flashy, dramatic angels you might envision in a Hollywood movie. They do not descend with swords drawn, nor do they engage in visible battles in the sky. They work quietly, gently, in the background of history. Their presence is often invisible, but their impact is immense. It is their subtle yet enduring influence that guides rulers, inspires justice, and creates conditions for nations to thrive or to fall. And it is in this quiet power, in this unseen work, that the principalities reveal their true strength. They do not fight with might, but with patience. They do not act with haste, but with wisdom. And they do not destroy, but rather withdraw, leaving behind a nation that must face its own consequences for turning away from divine order. It is time for us to ask ourselves, are we still aligned with the will of God? Are we allowing these unseen forces to guide us toward righteousness? Or are we, like so many before us, turning away from the divine direction? The principalities are not merely a concept from ancient times. They are alive and at work in our world today. Their influence may not be seen with human eyes, but their actions shape the world in ways that transcend time and space. We must learn from the past, understanding that when nations fall into corruption, it is not a coincidence. It is the withdrawal of divine favor. And when a nation rises, it is often because a principality is at work, guiding and shaping it toward justice, righteousness, and divine purpose. In the end, the question remains, how will we respond? Will we listen to the gentle nudge of the principalities, Or will we, like the empires of old, turn away, only to face the consequences of our own rebellion? As we continue this journey through history, spirituality, and divine governance, let us open our hearts to the wisdom of the principalities, for their influence is not just about empires and kings. It is about us and how we live in alignment with divine will. It's time to ask ourselves, are we ready to face the truth? The vast expanse of history is marked by the ebb and flow of civilizations, their rise and fall like the unpredictable tides of the sea. But behind these monumental shifts, behind the battles and the empires, there lies a hidden force, an unseen hand guiding, nudging, and shaping the course of nations. These are the principalities, the celestial beings that govern, guide, and when necessary, withdraw their influence, leaving the world to face the consequences of its actions. What happens when the divine guidance is removed? What becomes of a nation when the principality that once guided it departs? Consider the fate of Israel during its most turbulent times. A kingdom once blessed with the presence of God's divine guidance, Israel faced the forces of corruption and betrayal. When the principalities withdrew, allowing for the rise of kings who defied God's will, Israel fell into darkness. King Ahab, a ruler who led the nation into idolatry and sin, experienced the consequences of this withdrawal. His reign saw Israel's moral compass shattered, and the nation began its descent. The once thriving kingdom, protected and guided by divine forces, now teetered on the brink of destruction. The principality that had once guided the kingdom withdrew, leaving Israel to face its rebellion against divine order. This shift didn't happen overnight. The principalities do not act out of fury, nor do they deliver punishment with the speed of a storm. They are patient, deliberate, working quietly in the background, nudging humanity toward righteousness, guiding the leaders and nations toward divine order. But when that order is broken, when the alignment with divine will is lost, the principality withdraws. And once that withdrawal takes place, the consequences can be swift and unforgiving. Nations that were once powerful, thriving, and blessed can crumble into decay. The fall of Rome serves as another striking example. This mighty empire, once the pinnacle of civilization, was driven by a sense of divine purpose and order. But over time, as greed and corruption took root, the principalities, those silent guardians, began to pull away. Rome, once united under the banner of divine justice, now struggled with moral decay and internal strife. The empire fractured, its leaders no longer aligned with the divine principles that had once ensured its greatness. The Principality of Rome was no longer there to guide and correct, and the empire fell into disarray, crumbling from the inside out. When the principalities withdraw, they do not do so in anger or rage. They simply step back, allowing the natural consequences of sin and rebellion to unfold. It is the absence of their influence that leaves nations vulnerable to the corrupting forces of human nature. Without their guidance, nations are left adrift, with no spiritual anchor to hold them steady. The principalities are not there to control free will. They are there to guide, to nudge, and to remind humanity of the divine order that must be followed for true prosperity and peace. But there is a deeper lesson here, a lesson that speaks directly to us today. The fate of nations, the rise and fall of empires, and the course of human history are all deeply intertwined with the spiritual forces at work in the world. The principalities may not be visible, but their influence is undeniable. They guide the moral compass of nations, shaping the destiny of empires, and even influencing the very institutions that govern us. Yet, when those institutions fail to align with divine will, when corruption takes hold, the principalities withdraw. And with that withdrawal comes a spiritual emptiness, a void that cannot be filled by earthly power alone. This is where the story takes on a personal dimension. If we, as individuals, are to survive and thrive in this world, we must align ourselves with divine principles. The principalities are not there to force us into submission. They are there to guide us toward the truth, to help us align with God's will, and to inspire us to live with integrity, justice, and righteousness. When we turn away from those principles, when we allow greed, hatred, and selfishness to take root in our hearts, we too experience the withdrawal of divine favor. We may not see it with our eyes, but the absence of that guidance will be felt in the deepest parts of our souls. The principalities offer us a glimpse into the divine order, showing us that our actions have consequences far beyond our understanding. Every choice we make, every decision we take, reverberates through the spiritual realms. We may not see it immediately, but the effects of our choices are far-reaching, affecting not only ourselves but the world around us. And just as nations can rise and fall under the influence of the principalities, so too can our lives experience the blessings or consequences of our alignment with divine will. Take a moment to reflect. Where are we as a society today? Have we, like ancient kingdoms, lost our way, allowing the principalities to withdraw? Are we aligned with divine purpose, or are we drifting into a spiritual void, with no guiding force to direct us? This is not just a question for nations or empires, it is a question for each of us as individuals. The principalities are still at work in the world today, shaping the course of history and the destiny of nations. But their influence is not a given. It is something we must actively choose to accept and follow. And when we do, we invite the divine guidance that leads to peace, prosperity, and spiritual fulfillment. The world today is at a crossroads. The forces of corruption, division, and hatred are rising, and the principalities are watching. Will we, like the nations of old, reject their guidance, or will we choose to align with divine will, inviting the influence of the principalities to guide us toward righteousness, justice, and peace? This choice is ours, and the consequences of that choice will be felt not only in our own lives, but in the world around us. As we continue this journey through the spiritual realms, let us remember the lessons of the past. Let us learn from the rise and fall of empires, from the withdrawal of divine favor, and from the silent influence of the principalities. For in understanding their role, we understand our own place in the grand design of creation. And in that understanding, we find the path to true spiritual fulfillment, a path that leads us back to the divine order that has guided humanity for millennia. Now more than ever, it is time to ask, what role will we play in this unfolding story? Will we align ourselves with the forces of divine will, or will we, like so many before us, turn away, only to face the consequences of our choices? The answer lies in our hearts, in the choices we make today, and in our willingness to listen to the quiet guidance of the principalities as they continue to shape the world around us. In every age, the whispers of divine will have shaped the course of history. The principalities, though unseen to the mortal eye, have been at the helm of these forces, guiding rulers, shaping nations, and guarding the structure of civilization itself. But what happens when their influence is withdrawn? What becomes of the nations, empires, and kingdoms that lose touch with divine direction? In the modern world, we often feel disconnected from the power of these spiritual beings. We look to politics, economics, and human leadership to explain the rise and fall of nations, but the true forces at play are far deeper than the human eye can see. The principalities are still at work, albeit in subtle ways. They are not silent because they do not care. They are silent because they are waiting. They are waiting for us to align with divine will once more, to seek the path of righteousness, justice, and peace. The power of the principalities is not a power that forces or coerces. It is the quiet power of influence, of guidance, of nudging civilizations toward divine order. When nations align with this divine purpose, they flourish, they rise, and they become great. But when they stray from this path, When corruption seeps into the leadership, when injustice reigns, the principalities withdraw, and with their withdrawal comes a void. This void is filled with chaos, corruption, and decay. Take a moment to reflect on the state of the world today. Are we witnessing the withdrawal of divine favor? When we look at the global challenges of our time, political unrest, widespread corruption, social injustice, are we seeing the natural consequences of nations straying too far from divine order? It is not enough to blame human leadership alone for the state of the world. Behind every political system, behind every movement of power, there lies a greater spiritual force at work. And when the principalities withdraw, we witness the unraveling of everything that once held society together. Consider the example of modern society. In the midst of so much division, greed, and unrest, the question must be asked, where are the guiding forces? Where are the principalities that once guided nations to prosperity and peace? The truth is, they are still present, still watching, still waiting. But the question remains, are we listening? Are we willing to open ourselves to the influence of the divine, to return to a place of alignment with the eternal principles that have governed civilizations for millennia? This is not a question of power or politics. This is a question of the heart. Are we as individuals willing to submit to the will of the principalities, to allow their guidance to lead us toward justice, peace, and righteousness? For when we align with the divine order, we find ourselves in harmony with the forces of the universe. But when we turn away, when we forsake divine justice for personal gain, we invite the withdrawal of favor, and we find ourselves adrift in the chaos of our own making. There is a powerful lesson to be learned from the history of nations and empires. Every rise, every fall, every moment of greatness or decay is intertwined with the presence or absence of divine influence. The history of Israel is perhaps the clearest example of this truth. When Israel was aligned with God's will, it flourished, it thrived, and it became a beacon to the world. But when the nation turned away, when the people sought to serve their own desires over the divine calling, the principalities withdrew, and the nation fell into darkness. This is not a story confined to ancient Israel. It is the story of every nation, every individual, and every society. The forces of the principalities are still at work in the world today. Their guidance is not always loud, not always visible, but it is there, shaping the moral and spiritual fabric of the world. When we stray from divine principles, when we allow corruption to take root, we find ourselves separated from the very guidance that once brought us prosperity. Now, consider the state of the church today. As principalities are entrusted with the spiritual well-being of nations, so too are they responsible for the spiritual health of the church. The church, as a global institution, is not immune to the influence of these divine forces. When the church is aligned with divine order, when it lives according to God's will, it becomes a powerful force for good in the world. But when it strays, when it becomes complacent, corrupt, or distracted by worldly power, the principalities withdraw, and the church, like any institution, becomes vulnerable to the spiritual decay that follows. In our modern world, we face many challenges. But perhaps the greatest challenge we face is the spiritual decay that has taken root in every aspect of society. The moral compass of nations has shifted, and we have turned away from divine guidance. We live in a world where power and greed often take precedence over justice and righteousness. And in this, the principalities are calling to us. They are whispering to us in the silence, urging us to return to a place of spiritual alignment, to embrace the divine order that has governed the world since the beginning of time. The truth is this: the principalities are still at work. They are still guiding, still influencing, still shaping the fate of nations, empires, and the church. But their influence is not automatic. It is something we must actively seek. We must choose to align ourselves with divine will, to listen to the silent guidance of the principalities, and to turn away from the forces of corruption that threaten to tear us apart. Now, more than ever, we must open our hearts to the divine guidance that the principalities offer. We must turn away from the chaos and corruption of this world and seek to align ourselves with the forces of justice, peace, and righteousness. When we do, we invite the divine favor that will guide us toward prosperity and peace. And in doing so, we become part of the grand story of humanity, a story that is not just shaped by human hands, but by the silent influence of the principalities who have watched over us for millennia. The question now is simple. Will we listen to their quiet call, or will we continue down the path of rebellion and chaos? The choice is ours, but the consequences of that choice will echo throughout eternity. The principalities are not distant, abstract concepts. They are alive and active in the world today. They are waiting, watching, and guiding us toward a future of peace and justice. But we must choose to align with their divine will. The time is now. Will we heed their call, or will we turn away? The future of the world depends on the answer to this question. As we come to the end of this journey through the unseen realms where the principalities operate, I want to take a moment to reflect on everything we've uncovered. These celestial beings, invisible yet incredibly powerful, are not just distant concepts locked in the dusty pages of ancient texts. They are alive, at work, shaping the very fabric of human history. They are the hidden forces behind the rise and fall of nations, the invisible hands guiding the fate of empires, and the guardians of divine order that we often fail to recognize. But we are not left without hope. There is still time for us to turn our hearts, to realign ourselves with the divine guidance that has shaped civilizations and carried them to greatness. The principalities are still active today, watching, waiting, and guiding those who are willing to listen. They are not just passive observers, they are active stewards, shaping the spiritual and moral direction of the world. They are here, in the midst of our struggles and our triumphs, quietly influencing the outcome of our choices, nudging us toward righteousness, and steering us away from the destructive forces of corruption. And yet, in our world today, we see so much division, confusion, and darkness. The moral compass of nations seems to be lost, the voices of justice drowned out by the clamor of self-interest and greed. The principalities, once vibrant and active in guiding nations toward justice, peace, and righteousness, appear to be withdrawn. But perhaps the real question is not whether they are still present, but whether we, as individuals and as societies, are still willing to listen to their guidance. The divine order that once governed the hearts and minds of rulers and nations is not lost. It is only waiting for us to choose it once again. In the same way that the principalities can withdraw their favor when a nation turns away from divine justice, we too can feel the absence of that spiritual guidance when we allow our hearts to be consumed by selfishness, greed, and pride. But it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to continue down this path of destruction. We can choose to align ourselves with the will of the principalities, to return to a place of spiritual integrity and righteousness, and to allow the divine guidance to shape our hearts and our actions once more. The power to change, to realign, and to rebuild is within us. It always has been. As we move forward, we must remember that the principalities are not here to control or dominate. They are here to guide and protect, to lead us toward the divine purpose that has been set out for us since the beginning of time. It is up to us whether we choose to listen to their whispers, whether we open our hearts to the divine order they are trying to restore in this world. And so, I ask you now, what will you choose? Will you align yourself with the forces of divine justice, Or will you continue down the path of rebellion and chaos? Will you listen to the quiet, patient guidance of the principalities? Or will you turn away, leaving yourself vulnerable to the forces of corruption and decay? The choice is yours, and it is a choice that will not only shape your life, but also the fate of the world around you. If you feel the stirring in your soul, if this message has touched a place deep within you, I invite you to join me in spreading this truth. There is power in aligning with the divine will, and together we can create a world that reflects the righteousness and justice that the principalities are trying to guide us toward. Your support, your engagement, your willingness to share this message can help bring light to those who are lost in the darkness. If this video has brought you even the smallest amount of light, if it has helped you find peace or clarity in a world that often feels chaotic, I ask you to consider offering a small gesture of support. Your energy, your engagement, your participation, it all matters. It's not just about the numbers, but about the collective power of hearts coming together in alignment with divine will. Every like, every comment, every share is a small but powerful ripple in the vast ocean of change that we can create together. If you feel called, if this message resonates with you, then take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps this message alive, and together we can spread the divine truth that the principalities are waiting to guide us toward. We are not alone. We are surrounded by invisible forces of guidance, and it's up to us whether we choose to open our hearts to their influence. I thank you from the depths of my heart for being part of this journey. Your presence here, your willingness to explore these deeper truths, brings light to the darkness. Together, we can create a world that aligns with divine purpose, a world where justice, righteousness, and peace prevail. Let us listen to the principalities. Let us allow their influence to guide us, and let us rise together as a people who are united in purpose, in spirit, and in divine will. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and hope, I leave you with this thought. The forces of divine order are still at work in the world today. Will you align yourself with them? Will you be part of the change? The choice is yours. The future is ours to shape.